Hey guys, burning daylight here. Let's get this film in. Let's get out of here because we all got stuff we got to do tonight, right? I'm gonna do this review on the Himiway Cruiser. This is the long range, their long range fat bike. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go over this bike. I'm gonna do some hill climb tests on it, some top speed tests. I'm gonna rate it. I'm gonna give it a score on overall value, performance, quality, the ride quality. And I'm gonna give it a score. Each one's gonna be out of 10. So I'm gonna get out of 50 what this total bike is gonna have. If you're interested in my other Premade e-bike reviews, check out my playlist, Premade e-bike reviews. And maybe like, wait, what do you mean? Why are you saying Premade e-bike? Because I make custom e-bikes. That's what I do for a living. But I also know that custom made e-bikes are not for everybody. Some people just want to click and buy. And so as a professional e-bike builder, I will give you my thoughts and opinions on this bike. If you are interested in doing a custom e-bike, check out johnnynerdout.com. I got all your custom e-bike components and your help. I do consultations where, you know, if you got help, you wanted to figure out how to design a bike or what you should use, what kind of gearing you need, what kind of offset, chainring offsets, or if you're like, I don't even know what the hell you're saying, I'll help you. So check out johnnynerdout.com. But the beast at hand is this beast. This is the Himiway. This is a beast of a bike. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start at the front of the bike. I think that's just the best, and go to the back. So the very front of this, the tires. These are 26 by 4-inch tires. Pretty standard for a fat bike, for a cruiser fat bike like this. You'll see that it's probably very common, most common tire size. They also got fully integrated fenders. These are pretty solid. They mount onto the front fork here as well. And as well as mounting here. So there's 2 points of contact, which is nice. So they're not going to be super flimsy. They look like they're just plastic, but it should be fine. Up front, we've got a dual LED headlight. It's actually fairly bright. I don't know about lumens, but I don't know if you can see that. It's kind of bright out here, but it's adequate. I'd say it's adequate. It's probably like a, I don't know, 250, 300 lumen. It's adequate. It's good if you get caught out at night. It's good to have this. You'll definitely make it home. You ain't gonna be dying. It does have a suspension front fork, which actually does work fairly good. I did some off-roading and I was going over some hills and I was like kind of getting nervous. If I didn't have that front suspension fork, probably would have been in a little bit of trouble. You definitely can go over if you hit something. I was definitely pushing a little too hard and I found like some unevenness in the grass, and fortunately the shock compressed and I didn't. It does have a lockout, which is nice. You lock it out, you're able to drive on the pavement. It's a little bit more efficient that way. You're not losing energy through the front fork. And then when you go off-road, turn it off so that it will compress. And it's got mechanical disc brakes. They feel okay. They're not crazy, but I feel like most fat bikes like this are not gonna have the greatest brakes. They're not gonna be like a little road bike that, you know, you barely touch them and it just wants to throw you over. It's not like this. This bike, I can lock up the rear tire, which is good. That's a good sign. But it's definitely not super strong braking. It does have it's got the Tektro Aries calipers and brake system. I personally, if this was my bike, I'd be upgrading it to the hydraulic system. And up here, they do have, there's an integrated bell into the brake handle, which is nice. I like having a bell. Some people are like, what do you need that for? Man, on e-bikes, you sneak up on people all the time, and it's much better being like, hey, watch out. I got eggs. They're getting warm. Gotta get home, put them in the fridge. You just do this. It's like that pitch, it'll go through. They got headphones on, it'll go through that instead of your voice, which is, you know, getting blended out. It's got this trigger style thumb diff shifter, the 7-speed Shimano. Some people really like this. Personally, I don't, but some people really like it. So whatever camp you're in, there's no right or wrong. They are on the lower end as far as quality goes, but as long as it works good, Shimano, it's gonna work good. It's got a half twist grip. Whoa, it's live, it's on. So you can see, it just wants to go. It's got the nice, kind of more, it's a cruiser, so it's got the cruiser style handlebars, kind of come out. I kind of wish they came out a little bit more, but you know, they come up. It does have mounts here for a front rack, which if this was my bike, I would definitely get a front rack on. I like making a bike utilitarian as much as possible. It's got the little toggle switch here to control your display. And the display it's a black and white, it's just a basic black and white display. Nothing fancy, it just shows you your pedal assist level 1 through 5, so you get 5 different levels. Tells you your speed. A rough battery gauge. It's got that like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bars, 1 out of 5, so give or take 20%. It's not super accurate. I wish it would have showed voltage. When you have the voltage, you know exactly where you're at. But this is, you know, it's kind of like it's like the dummy gauge. It's like when your oil light comes on in your old cars, it's like, hey, you just ran out of oil. Your engine is about to seize up. It's kind of like what this is a little bit. And then it's got trip meter on the bottom, odometer, your total odometer, time that you've been riding, your maximum speed, and your average speed. So it's a basic bike computer. If you've ever had a bike computer or anything, it's pretty much that. Down here is the battery. It's like the long, slim battery. It's a 48 volt, 17.5 amp hour battery pack, so it's 840 watt hours. Himiway says you could get up to 60-mile range, which I believe it's about 14. I think it's 14 watt hours per mile is what they're calculating. So if you're going 14 watt hours a mile, you're pretty much on pavement, going flat, doing about 10 miles an hour, and you're pedaling with it. So yeah, it kind of depends. Range is like such a weird thing. Everybody wants to know what kind of range you're going to get. You either go fast or you go far. So if you're just using throttle, obviously this is not like a super efficient bike with energy, the fat tires, and it's a heavier bike. You're not going to be very efficient. You might be burning closer to 30 watt hours a mile, which would put you at like the 25-mile range. It just really depends on how you ride. If you plan on pedaling a lot and not using a lot of power, you will go far. But if you don't, you're not going to go far. If you're going to go fast, you're not going to go far. You can see here's the controller mounted underneath here. It's weather sealed, so I wouldn't worry about, you know, water getting on it. If you're riding in the rain or on the beach or something, it should be fine. I wouldn't worry about it. This battery is removable. It does have another dummy gauge battery, 1 out of 4 bars on here. Again, it's not super helpful, but it's good to know at least somewhat of where your battery's at. If you're like, hey, I'm gonna go on a long ride, and then you go and you're like, I got 1 bar left. Yeah, probably not a good idea. Just standard crank arms, standard Well-Go pedals. They're just the basic stuff. It does have a little bash guard here to protect the rear derailleur. I do like having these. I think they're smart to have on your bike. You never know, if you lay your bike down or something, these derailleurs and the derailleur hanger, more importantly, will get bent if you ever lay it down on this side. If you're ever laying your bike down, lay it down on the non-drive side, because these things will get bent, and then all of a sudden your bike is not shifting anymore. People are just ride around with clanging. So this is nice. This is good to have here. It's got a little fabric sleeve here to protect the chain slap against this thing. It's got a nice little wooden deck here for the rear rack, and the rear rack actually is, like, you know, pretty solid. You could probably put a person on here. I wouldn't, like, up to like 180-pound person probably, or probably even more. If you've had a bunch of road sodas, you could probably fit a 250-pound person on here, no problem. It was kind of weird that the light comes with it, but it came with an excess amount of wire. Like, it was way too long. I don't know if this was just this model that I got, but there's way too much cabling here. I was like, that seems weird. There's probably like that much extra cabling, so you gotta like tuck it up and hide it somewhere. It does have a rear fender here as well for the rear tire, so it's nice. These big fat tires, if there's any moisture on the ground, it's gonna pick it up and chuck it on you and your back. You're gonna get that skunk stripe on your back. It's got a rear mounted kickstand, which is nice. I like having the rear mounted ones are a little bit better than the center mount, which is better stability. It does have a brake light, which is kind of nice. You hit that and it blinks when you hit the brakes. It's good for safety, so people know when you're actually braking. I actually kind of wish that it stayed solid, but I don't know. I guess it's one of those things too. It's like whatever you prefer. Blinking kind of will grab more attention, but doesn't look like a brake light. That's nitpicky. Let's go do a performance test. So let's see how this thing climbs hills and what the top speed is. And obviously with top speed, you gotta trick it, because its throttle only goes up to 20. So I just put it up to the highest pedal assist and just kind of dummy pedaled and let it go. Obviously I'm in Washington now. And I got a new hill that I'm gonna do, and I actually got two hills. One, I'm gonna call it the Widowmaker because it's very steep. It's almost, you would never see this type of hill in the wild. And then I have another hill next to it that's, even that one's pretty steep, but I think I'm gonna show hill climbs using both of these hills going forward, just to kind of show you hill climbing. All right, so let's go check it out. So you can see on the Widowmaker hill, this thing needed a lot of runway to get up. It does have the 750 watt, 48 volt Bafang hub motor there, which these motors are actually fairly torquey. I think they have it programmed though, so it doesn't send all that power immediately. It's still, it's not enough to really get up. So this bike needs a lot of runway to get up that hill. You can see on the other hills though, it performs just fine. Like most hills that you're gonna come across in the wild, unless you're doing serious off-roading or like hunting, but you're not getting, this bike is not for that. That's one of the main drawbacks of hub motors is the hill climbing, the low end torque. Hub motors just don't have it. Hub motors are more like mid-range, high mid-range is where their wheelhouse is, pun intended. And then you can see top speed was 22, I think it was like 22.6. So, but I think that was definitely firmware limited because this motor has got more juice to it. You can see it was like teetering out. So if you could get into the secret menu on this and raise the top speed, this bike will do a lot faster. I bet you would top out low 30s probably. What I like about this bike is it comes with lights and sounds. The bell and the front and rear light. That's good. Full fenders, front and rear, full coverage fenders. That's really good. Keeps you dry. I really like that the rack is on here. It comes with a built-in rack. Not built-in rack, but it comes with the rack that bolts in. Range is better than most bikes out there, I would say. A lot of bikes are putting out 10 amp hour or 14 amp hour packs. They're really cheaping out on that. Batteries are really not that expensive, especially now. It's 2022. A 48 volt, 17.5 amp hour pack is like 500 bucks or less. So when they cheap out on those, it's like, oh, come on, man. So it's good to see the 48 volt, 17.5 amp hour. That's good for a decent amount of range. Obviously, it depends on how big you are and how fast. What I don't like about it, I noticed when I was riding, well, two things I'm not crazy about. I'm not crazy about this. You're kind of still leaning forward. I would like to see this closer. I want to see the handlebars right about here. And this is the problem I think I had with my HJM fat bike, which is essentially the exact same bike, just slightly different. But the ergonomics are a little forward for me. I'm 6 foot 180 on a good day. So, you know, if you're bigger, smaller, it might affect you differently. And this only comes in one size frame, I believe. As of now, it only comes in one size frame. So it's one of those one size fits most. It's like a futon. So, you know, be aware of that, of how that's gonna ride. For me, it's a little far forward. I feel like I'm riding an ape hanger or something. The other thing that I wasn't crazy about was the performance, and I think some other people, it may bug some other people, but when you're in pedal assist 1 and you start pedaling, that initial kind of lurch, it is kind of a bit much. If you're an older rider or you're somebody who's a little timid on bikes, I did notice that it's kind of like a woo, but you know, it tops out at about 8 miles an hour, so it's not going to just shoot you off like a rocket dangerously. but it does kind of, from 1 to 3 miles an hour, it's kind of, it'll snap your neck back a little bit if you're not paying attention. I'm sure you'll just get used to it though. And you can't configure that. You can't program that because the settings are just locked in to that controller. So I don't know. There's one thing that was a little. I would have liked to have seen that be dialed down a little bit more. Okay, so now let's get onto the rating system. Let's go to performance. It's got that 750 watt 48 volt hub motor, which is pretty decent. Hill climbing, obviously, you're not buying this for a hill climber. If you do want that, you want to go for a mid-drive, but that's not what this bike really was intended for. This bike is for cruising. So just keep that in mind. This is like a beach cruiser. This is something that if you're, you know, hanging out on a boardwalk or around the neighborhood and stuff, and it's gonna be great at that. But performance, I give it a 6 for performance. So keep in mind if you need that or if you don't. Most people don't need performance, but if you do, just keep that in mind. Let's go for quality. So this would just be bike quality. It was a pretty solid bike. There's nothing really on here that I feel like is just, you know, super cheap. It's nothing. You know, the crank arms, sometimes you see some bikes and the crank arms are super thin and you're just like, all right, they cheaped out. They went for the cheapest everything. The brakes are Tektros, at least they're a name brand. They're not the highest end ones, they're not hydraulic, they're just mechanical, but they're name brand stuff. It's Shimano. I mean, it's like not terrible components on it. So for quality, I'll give it a 7. Give it a 7 for quality. That's pretty good. Obviously, this isn't like a Ferrari. The base price on this is like what, $1,500-$1,600. You can't expect like a Premade e-bike to have Ferrari components for a Ford price. For ride quality, that's how I go for riding it. It's pretty comfortable. That once you're going, like it's comfortable. Like it absorbs a lot of road noise and imperfection, and even off-road stuff like imperfections in the gravel because of these big fat tires and the front suspension fork. And I got whipping around pretty quick going around those hills and stuff, and I was like, this thing's pretty fun. It kind of reminded me of like riding a dirt bike off-road, like a super lightweight dirt bike. Just not like super powerful, but it's kind of fun. The only thing that it's gonna lose some points is, again, this ergonomic and that initial takeoff. Those are the only two things that I'm kind of like, meh. Other than that, you know, it is what it is. It's like it's a Ford F-150 truck. It just, you're getting what you pay for. And it's not trying to be anything else. It's not trying to be a Ferrari. So I'll give it a 7 for ride quality as well. And it kind of depends on where you're riding it. You know, if you're riding at low speeds on boardwalks, I'd probably give it more like a 7. But if you're off-road, light off-road, it's more like an 8, I'd say. But I'm gonna stick with 7 because that's like the all-purpose 7. So design, obviously the frame, you've seen these frames everywhere. Every fat cruiser bike uses this exact frame. There's nothing really new going on here, but it's a solid design. It's a no frills design, but you know, it works. Definitely works. I'll give it another 7. I'll give it a 7 for design. There's nothing crazy that's great, but there's nothing crazy that's like, what were they thinking? It's a safe bike, design-wise. And then overall value, this is probably like the biggest one. For $1,600, this is a super hot segment. That's the thing. I mean, you're competing with like Rad Power. The list goes on and on and on and on. There's way too many e-bike brands out there that are selling a bike like this with their frames. They're kind of right in the middle of the pack. Obviously, you get a bigger name like Himiway. There's the Aventon, whatever you pronounce it, Rad Power. They're all in that like $14 to $1,600 range, and so it's you're kind of getting what you pay for. This does have a little bit bigger battery. I'll give it a 7 for value too. It's right in the middle there with the competitors and everything, so it's a 7 for value. So yeah, who do I think this bike is for? It's definitely not for somebody who's going to be doing serious off-road riding or serious long range touring. I wouldn't say that. If you're doing that, you're buying like a touring bike, something made for long distance. It is good though that this does have a longer range battery, so you could forget to charge it, for example, for you know, 1 or 2 rides. But this is definitely like a neighborhood cruiser, maybe like a good adventure bike. I could see like somebody who hasn't been into biking for a while using this to go down that bike path that goes down by the river, and then if there's like a little dirt path that goes off of that bike path, yeah, use this to go down there and go explore some riverbeds and stuff like that. Nothing crazy, but definitely like an entry-level adventure bike, I would say. So definitely, if you're getting back into biking, this style frame, you've probably been looking at these. There's a lot of competitors, but check out the range. If range is important to you, that may be for you. Also, one more thing, the display does have a USB charge port on it, so you could charge your phone, or if you wanted to put like a headlight on here in addition to this, like a brighter one, you totally could. Okay, so hopefully you guys found this helpful. Feel free to ask me any questions in the comments below, and maybe other people who own this bike can also chime in to answer any questions, or fill in the gaps that maybe I forgot with some real life experience. So check out my other Premade e-bikes if you're interested in other Premade e-bikes, and go to johnnynerd.com if you want one-on-one help, consultations. God bless America.